I think we can resume and let's briefly discuss about event handling, okay? Because we're still missing a piece. I mean, we loaded the code and we made the code, we asked the code to do some modification to the DOM tree, but I mean, there's no actual interaction. Okay, we loaded the code and we got current date. No, that was the other example. I lost it. We loaded the current date. By the way, taken from the local system, okay? But then, how do we interact with the user? How do we interact with the rest of the world? Okay? And that's the issue about the events, okay? JavaScript in the browser uses an event-driven programming model, okay? As I told you, there is this event loop. You have functions attached to events, and this function gets executed when the event happens, okay? So everything is triggered by the firing of an event, okay? Maybe just the initial loading time when the HTML finishes loading. Basically, the browser knows it has to execute all the JavaScript code that has been loaded. But later on, the rest is just triggered by events. Events are determined by the element generating the event, which is called the event target. Unfortunately, not source, but target, okay, in the documentation and the APIs and so on. And the type of generated event. So there is a tag. We click on a tag like a button. It generates an event, okay? So the event target is the button. Unfortunately, it's not the event source. That is more logical from the point of view of the language. And there is the type of the event, click or double click or mouse over or whatever event may happen, okay? And JavaScript supports different ways of defining event handlers. There are basically three, but we only see one, which is the modern one, the most modern one, that is add event listener, okay? Very easy to use. There is a method, add event listener, that you can call on any node inside the DOM tree, okay? Or even on window for events that happen at the window level, okay? So you need to give the name of the event, and there is a long list of events, but we are interested in a few events, like click, double click, mouse down, or I don't know, something like load and on change and so on, okay? And then you pass a callback. The callback actually contains the code to be executed when the event happens, okay? It takes some parameters, in particular one, that is the event, and the event object has two main properties. It has many properties, but two are very important. One is the dot target, so the DOM element that originated the event. Again, it's called target, not source. I don't know why they call it in this way. And the type of event, okay? And there's plenty of events. User interface event, load, resize, scroll, and so on. Focus, blur event, mouse events, the most common ones, click, double click, mouse over, drag, and so on. Keyboard events, you press some key on the keyboard. Form events, very important, we will use them. In particular, the change event, mutation event, HTML events, CSS events when the animation finishes, and so on. Okay? Okay, just a couple of slides and then we'll see an example. Some events already have a predefined behavior. Think about the URL. So you define an A tag, the anchor tag, with a link. You click on the link. You don't have to attach an event handler to navigate to a new page, right? It's automatic. The browser already has this predefined behavior inside. And this is a problem for our single-page applications because we want to handle all events by ourselves. And in particular, we don't want that the page reloads, okay? And this can happen in two occasions. One is the click on the anchor, so on a link. And the other is when we submit a form. There's a particular button in a form that sends the data to a server. That's the way traditional web applications work. Okay? Luckily, on this event object, there are also methods, in particular this prevent default method that we can call to tell the browser, first, when the event happens, please don't do your default action. Like on a link, we do prevent default, and the browser will not go and load the next page. Okay? Or when a form is submitted, the browser will not send the data to the server. And so through JavaScript, we can get handlers to the controls inside the form, so what the user has written inside the fields of the form, use them, process them, and do whatever you think is appropriate for the application. Okay? So just remember this event prevent default, which later on will be useful. Okay? Last thing about events, and then we'll talk about forms, but after the example. There are some events at the page level, not just a single, at the level of single HTML elements. Okay? For instance, DOM content loaded, defined on document, it fires, so it means it calls the callback associated to the event, if there is one, when the browser loaded all HTML content. Okay? And the DOM tree is ready. That is very useful. Why? Because we would like to know when the DOM is ready, because we may want to modify something in the DOM, okay, from the JavaScript code that we loaded in the beginning. Okay? And we saw before, without the defer and so on, it's always a problem to know when all the HTML has been parsed, everything is finished, and so we can work on a complete DOM tree. Load, the browser finishes loading all the external resources, so including all the external resources, all CSS, all JavaScript, and so on. And the unload or before unload, depends on the browser, I think. The user is about to leave the page. Do you know how websites know that you are leaving the page? Okay, you're moving away, using a browser button, using a link, whatever. And most of the browsers fire an event, an unload event, to which the website at loading time has attached some code. And typically this code is a window that says, are you sure you want to leave? And it blocks the operation, okay? So it prevents default, blocks the operation, and if you say, okay, I want to leave, okay, and so go, or maybe you can go back, okay? Not recommended in the sense it's not totally reliable, but might be useful sometimes, okay? Actually, not in our example, not for the exam, but I mean, since we want to have a complete discussion of all the issues, I mean, there's plenty of events that we can handle through JavaScript inside the browser, and so it's worth having a look sometimes at what is available. Okay. Events can also be generated internally by the browser. We saw before the set timeout, right? After a certain amount of time, an event happens that basically is the timeout expires, and we can run some code in response to this expiration. And this is exactly what we're going to do in this example, okay? You remember this example, a test with the date? So test. Oops, not found. I guess it was JS. That's why. Okay, good. I mean, just ignore this stuff. Sometimes the browser try to, let's say, do a lot of things we're not really interested in. Okay, checking if there is something available for debugging and stuff like that. Okay, you see the time. Okay. Yeah, more or less okay, because the time is okay locally. If you reload the page, this changes, of course, but then it stays like this. It doesn't update, right? But that's normal. We loaded the page, we execute the JavaScript code read the time, set the time, and that's all. And then the event loop, you remember the event loop? Has nothing to do. Nothing gets queued in the queue, in the callback queue. Let's put something in the callback queue and re-update the date every time the time changes. But actually, we don't know exactly when the time changes. But let's say, let's update the time every second, okay? And so hopefully, since we are showing seconds, every new second will be shown. The correct time will be shown. So, how do we do it? I mean, I didn't do an external file at the moment, just inside the JavaScript, just for convenience, okay? Otherwise, we can just say script, source, load the external file, and so on. Next example is like this. So, where do we attach the function that will do the modification? I mean, we need to attach it either to window or to some elements, to some nodes inside the DOM tree, right? So there's no other option, okay? So actually it's already here. I mean, the function is already here, right? The initial one is fine. And so we need to add event listener. I don't like what it's guessing, but well, actually no. Sorry. I mean, we have no event to listen. Okay, in this case. Actually, in this case, we want to have something like set interval, right? Okay, set timeout, but then it fires only one time because there is only one timeout, or maybe set interval, right? Okay. Set interval, you remember that we saw set timeout and set interval. Set interval calls the callback at a certain amount of times. So after a certain amount of times, repeatedly, okay? So 1 second, it calls the callback. Another second, it calls the callback, and so on, okay? So what's the callback? The callback is simply what we wrote before. Time element, inner HTML, JS, format, etc. Okay? 1 second, I think, yes, it's fine. Okay, so we just added the line. So here there's no event in the sense there's no name, because the event is internally generated. It's a timeout that expires, okay? And that periodically expires. Okay? Save and try. Okay? You see that it changes, right? The time changes. Okay, we developed a clock. Really. I mean, it seems like we just discovered the hot water, right? I mean, but the important thing is that at a certain time, a function gets queued in the callback queue. The event loop takes it, put the function on the call stack, execute the function. The function goes, takes the time, modifies the DOM. The DOM is updated, so the browser shows the new DOM. The function returns, call stack empty, event loop, nothing to do, waits for the next event. Okay? That's what's happening. Okay? And see, it goes on and on. We have, at the moment, we have no interest in stopping it. When does it stop? Well, when we close the page. That's how the browser works, okay? How website works. We close the page, everything is released, so the interpreter destroys everything that is in the JavaScript memory, and the interpreter is closed by the browser, and that's all. All memory is released, and that's all, okay? So just close it, and that's all. We open it again. No. And it starts again from scratch, right? So copy path. Okay, so all the story is repeated. You load the HTML. The HTML is parsed. JavaScript is executed, it sets an interval, so it means this timer that periodically expires and calls the callback, and the callback is called. The callback actually is not called, it's put into the callback queue. And luckily, it has very few things to do, and so basically, when it's queued, it's immediately executed. Okay? If the call stack is busy, this time will not be updated so frequently, or maybe updated fast enough to show every second. Okay? It depends on what the browser is doing. Hopefully, we will try to write code that gets executed in the call stack, which terminates quite quickly. Otherwise, we have no time to execute the callbacks that enter the callback queue in a timely manner. Okay? Okay, so that's the modification. Very simple, but very, I would say, effective. Okay? Why can we remove this line? Well, of course, we can try to remove this line, right? Save and just reload, right? But then you see the hello, right? I mean, we have the first line because if we set an interval, then we must wait a second to get the first update of the time, right? So if we want to do something before, we need to do it by ourselves with our code. Okay? So we leave this line here. Okay? Actually, I would say it would be nice that maybe we don't have the hello in the beginning, right? So because hello instead of the time maybe it's not so nice, right? So yeah, maybe it's empty and then the time appears. But these are issues about how to design an interface, not about JavaScript and so on, where we are interested more in these things. Okay, good. So we leave hello just because it's easier for debugging purposes to see what's happening. Good. Okay, so let's finish the discussion, and then we'll try to apply these principles to an example. Actually, the usual example we are carrying on during all these lectures, so the question and answer websites. And then in the lab, you'll try to apply this to your films example, list of films, etc. Okay? Good. So, form controls, a very important topic because it's through forms that users interact with the web applications. Okay? How do you declare a form? Use a form tag, and basically in a form tag you specify the year to be used for submission with the attribute action. Actually, we are not going to use it. That was for the traditional ways of programming up web applications. So you send the data to the server through a form, and the server creates a new HTML page. We are not going to use this method. We just want to intercept the event, let's say it's form submission, attach our event handler, prevent the default, that is sending the data to the server, and then process the data and decide what to do. Okay? HTTP method, okay, can be post or get, but again, we are not using it. And inside the form, you can have several tags that we name control that basically allows user interaction. The most common ones are the text box, where you can type things, okay? Like in a form where you register yourself, first name, last name, address, etc. Or username and password when you log in, etc. And then often buttons, okay? Okay, cancel, delete, and so on. And then other less, I would say, useful, but maybe a bit less common controls, like lists, okay? Combo box, where you can select an item from a list, or multiple selection from a list. A text area, when you're sending an email through a web application, you want to have more than one line, so you want to have a bigger text, and so on, stuff like that. Okay. As, the four controls are a set of HTML elements, allow different types of user input interaction. Each element should be uniquely identified by the value of the name attribute. Name equal to something. And we decide which name we want to give to each form control. Like name, first name, last name, name, address, name, zip code, name, I don't know, age, and so on, okay? Just a name that is meaningful for us and it's unique inside the form, because then through the name we can get a reference to the element and get the value that is written inside the text box or whatever it is, okay? So, input tag is the most famous tag, the one that was used and is still used nowadays for most of the form controls, okay? Because it's very flexible. It has an attribute that makes it behave in different ways, okay? So input, type text, name, first name, placeholder. You can even have a placeholder, so something already written inside that you can that you can how you say that gives you an hint about what to write, okay? I think the browser is tolerant enough to show you a form, yes, without a form tag, okay? I'm just copy-pasting a little bit in this way, which is very raw, and but I mean, just to be quick, okay? But if you really want to do things correctly, you should surround these tags with a form tag and so on, okay? But just to give you an idea, right? Your username, and then you type whatever you want, okay? And that's a form control. But I'm sure you already used many of them, okay? All web applications are created with these controls, okay? Okay, and then we need to get references to these elements. Okay, we have the usual way, get element by ID. You specify an ID. With form, sometimes it's a bit different because you want to be in a specific form. You have a name which is already unique and so on. So you might want to use a different way, like this document.forms that includes a collection, so a node list of all forms in the page. And each form has a list of elements where you can collect, that you can use to access each of the controls that contains the data that has been inserted by the user, okay? But, I mean, these are just details. You will see that later on when we use React, there is a more, let's say, hopefully friendly way of handling forms, okay? And so this is just the basic for all web applications, okay? When you don't use specific libraries to handle forms. So let's come back to the input tag. We saw the default one that was inputting text, but you can have a type attribute that can specify that is a button, a checkbox, color, date, email, and so, etc., etc., etc. Okay? Maybe the most famous one is the password one, right? A text, that's the default one. Just to show you, right? The password, right? Where is it? Type the name, password. Right? So save, just, okay. You know, a password, what does it do? It doesn't show you the content, right? But it's already automatically implemented by the browser, okay? So there are plenty of these input types, okay? Of course, the browser knows what you type, of course, right? It has to use it to perform, for instance, the authentication and so on. But there are many different types, like email, for instance, automatically check if it's an email or not. What you type is an email or not, okay? I mean, this is a check done on the client side, okay, just inside the browser. Then if your application needs an email, on the server side, you will need further checks. But, I mean, sometimes they are convenient, okay, because they are forcing you to behave in a certain way. Okay, radio buttons, range, okay, submit, this is a button, telephone, etc., etc. Other commonly used attributes, checked, disabled, read-only, required, size of the control, okay, autocomplete, etc., okay? I mean, you just need to test them, right? Size 40, okay? I mean, very easy, just test them. When you need them, I think at your level it's very easy to use these indications. Okay. Other attributes depends on the control. For instance, if it's type number, you might want to specify a minimum and a maximum value. If it's a text, it doesn't make sense, of course. Maybe you want a pattern instead, a regular expression, whatever it might be interesting for you. Okay? Okay, label and for, well, maybe we can skip them. I mean, it's just a way to associate labels to elements, so you can click on the label instead of the element, but I mean, really, maybe not so interesting. There is a text area tag. I mean, a multi-line is fine, but the point here is, actually, unfortunately, I didn't have a link with this image anymore, but the image is still there. Just be aware of the fact that default controls for the forms are rendered sometimes differently depending on the browser. Okay, there's a default appearance, but if you use a good library like Bootstrap or some other CSS library, and you apply the style, the form, the style which is designed for forms by the library, you typically get more or less the same appearance on all the browsers. Okay, so just remember this and don't become mad about these things. Just use the CSS library that you chose, like in this course we chose Bootstrap, to get a uniform appearance of these form controls. Okay, actually in the example here we didn't do anything. Okay, so that's the aspect, the default aspect of Firefox on Linux, and we keep it. Okay, unless we load Bootstrap and so on. Okay, good. Drop-down controls, a select with the list and so on, but again, this is stuff that is probably good to know, but when you need them, you just come and check or search the internet from a good source, I would say. Okay, just don't copy from any place, don't copy paste from any place. Maybe you go to some reputable resources. Or maybe, I don't know, maybe nowadays you can say, I asked the AI, okay, but then, let's say, ask yourself, does it make sense? Is it coherent with all the rest that I did? Is it something that seems to fit correctly? If yes, okay, I might risk using it. Otherwise, maybe it's better I check in the official documentation somewhere else. Okay, button tag. There is even a tag named button. Okay, so what's the difference between input type button and the button tag? We will see in a minute. Okay, but before that, there are 3 types of buttons. Because remember, we are in a form. Okay, so in the form there is the button of type submit. So it's a button that when pressed, the browser automatically collects all the content of the form and it would like to send it to the server. Okay, that's the default behavior of the form. To which URL? To the one that we specified in form before, action something. Okay, resets all the content of the form to the default value, and then there is a generic button which does nothing. Okay, and so what's the usefulness? Well, it's useful because now you have JavaScript. You can attach an event listener to the button, typically on the click event, and do something when the button is clicked. And it's entirely decided by what you write in your JavaScript code. Okay? So the behavior needs to be specified by JavaScript. So button versus input type button. Well, it's a bit more flexible. It can have a content here, right? While the default input type button cannot have a content. I mean, it has a value, so basically you can only change the name that you put on the button, so the string, but nothing else. With the button tag, you can make anything behave like a button. Okay. So you can create icons. You can have icons that that behaves like a button and so on. Okay. Default appearance might vary. You can solve it with CSS. Sometimes CSS is not enough, so in this case, probably better to avoid that control. Okay. You can program whatever you want, more or less, in JavaScript. So sometimes if you avoid some form controls and you design something yourself, maybe it's even better. Okay. So, for instance, the file upload control cannot be styled through CSS, so it's difficult to handle. Okay, even for some frameworks, CSS frameworks, and so on. So, I mean, don't be afraid too much of having a different appearance. I mean, this course is not about the appearance of the website. Of course, we would like to have something reasonable, okay? But apart from reasonable, I mean, this is not a course focusing on this aspect, okay? So, for nicer form, just use useful libraries like Bootstrap and so on, and that's all, okay? So, you create a form, you create a button, you apply the button style of Bootstrap, and that's all. Okay, you get a nice rounded button with a nice color and so on, and that's all. Okay, let's come to events. These are the most important events on the input elements in forms, and I would say the most important one is change. When something changes in the element, the event fires. That means it's the function that has been associated to the event through the add event listener is put into the callback queue. Okay? So you change something in a control, like in the text in the text box that we saw before, you type a new character, something has changed. If you added the listener to the change event, that listener, that means the function, the callback you passed when you call the add event listener, gets queued inside the callback queue, and then executed when the event loop has the call stack that is free. Okay. Yeah, then you have blur and so on, but I mean, maybe less important. Okay. So, let's just try this example, okay? So, form, okay? Copy, paste. I would use this example. Okay, so I think we can remove this control and just put this form, right? So let me format this a little bit better, okay? So form, add, post with input type text. Actually, probably would be better name, I don't know, T. Submit, we don't really need a name, okay? So save. Okay, so that's what we have on the slide. You see, if I do nothing, I press the submit button, it goes to /add. Okay, of course there's nothing there. It's a local file. Okay, so not good. But we can add event listeners, right? So let's just try this code. Okay, copy paste and then we comment it. Okay, maybe we can close this one so you can see the form and the rest. Okay, so const input field document query selector, just for practice. Okay, we could have document.forms, the form name, and so on, okay? Just for practicing. Query selector. And we write a selector which is a bit, let's say, complex compared to what we saw last time. So you can specify, well, this is the normal selector input, but then you can specify a certain attribute, okay, type text. So this basically gets a reference to this element, okay? Input field, add event listener, input. Input is the event. Event console log, okay? And then we can add a second event listener. You can add as many event listener as you want to any element, okay? That's the powerfulness of the add event listener. By the way, with the old style, programming styles, basically you could only add one event listener, so you had to change the code of the event handler, okay? So here, we add a second event listener for another event. The value has changed since last time, okay? Okay, so save, let's try. Okay, we reloaded it, but I want the console open, right? So A, okay? The current entered value is A, B, C, D, okay? Events happen, okay? In particular, the event that happens here is the input has changed, okay? Input has changed, so there is this event listener, this callback registered to the event listener for the input event on a certain specific element, okay? And so it gets queued in the callback queue, okay? It is executed, it does the console log, it finishes the execution on the call stack, and then event loop waits for the next callback to execute, okay? What does it print? Input field dot value, okay? You see dot value, we say value is an attribute of, input field value. No, let's create a closure of input field. Okay, it doesn't matter. We can have event value, I think. Target value, okay? So you remember the target? Target was the reference to the node that created the event, okay? Inside the DOM tree. And of course, this node has certain properties depending on the type. The input type text has the property value, okay? So let's save it. Let's reload it. And let's see if it works. A, B, C, D, E, D, etc. Okay? It works in the same way. So what's the difference? Well, practically there's no difference. Okay? So you can print input field dot value, that's fine. You can print event dot target dot value, that's the same. Okay? Just for convenience, the add event listener takes a callback, and this callback receives as a first parameter this reference to an object that contains different attributes, including the target. That means it's the node that created the event. Okay? Just for convenience, because when you program this these behaviors in JavaScript, sometimes you don't have this reference immediately available, okay? Or maybe you just write an event handler that can handle different events and so on. And so if you get an object that says which node has generated the event, the rest of your code is much easier, right? Okay, good. Value has changed since last time, I think. The value has changed since last time. Okay, why it happened? I don't know what. Okay, so you see, I press the tab to make, or just you click outside. Okay, I mean you make the control lose focus. Okay, and so there is another event that happens that is the change. Okay, instead of the input. Okay, but I mean it's easy to try this behavior because you have the console log, right? So you just print inside an event handler and you try whatever you want in short. Okay, submit query, still a problem, right? Let's for instance do something from scratch, right? I don't have any examples here. Form, action, add. So, document, query selector. Oh, it reads in my mind. Okay, query selector, form, add event listener, submit, event, prevent default. Okay, the form is submitted with value. Okay, but this is just a console log, just to try. Okay, so we use the same code as before, right? Query selector form, so we get a reference to the form because it's the form that is generating the submit event. How? Through the click on the submit type of the submit button. Okay, so the button that has type submit. So when it's pressed, it starts the behavior, the traditional behavior of forms, so sending data to the server. Let's try the example. So we reload everything from scratch. I press the shift just to reload everything, including resources and so on. So it's like closing and reopening the whole page. Okay. A, B, C. Okay. Submit query. Okay. You see, it didn't load /add. We changed the behavior of the form because we executed a function that first thing it did, prevent default. So don't send the information to the server. Don't try to load the URL of the form. And second thing, of course, it did the console log. The form is submitted with value something. Okay? So submit event prevent default, console log, whatever you want. Okay? Oh, in this case, of course, we have to use the input field. Okay? Because now the target is the form. Either we do event.target first children, I don't remember how it's named, okay? And so we can get the value, but then it depends how we constructed the HTML. Or here we need to use a reference that we already have. Just a note, you see that here we have input field. We use it in this callback, okay? How can input field be available to the callback when the callback is executed? You know that this is the closure mechanism we talked about in the previous, in this maybe second lecture of this course. Okay, so it doesn't matter. The important thing is that the variable, in this case input field, is visible. So it is in the scope of the function when the function was declared. It creates automatically the closure. That's why we have this closure mechanism in JavaScript, because we are always, all the time, writing event handlers in this way. And if we don't have the closure mechanism, basically when you run the callback, it will say, well, I cannot access input field variable. Okay? So it's sort of natural having the closures in JavaScript, because it was developed exactly for this purpose. Define a callback at a certain point and execute it later. Okay? So what was visible to the function must remain visible when the function is executed later. Okay? Okay, good. So I save it, I commit it later. So we finished the slides, but not the lecture. Okay? Because I want you to create a more complex example. Okay, the prevent default, we saw it. Okay? It's fine. always remember to use it, but I will recall this again because we are talking about forms with React later on in the course. So, today we want to develop something more for our application. You remember the question and answer application? You remember the mock-up? Okay, our heap overrun. So it's basically a table with a list of answers, and we will add some behavior over the course, over the duration of the course. So, like we want to have a form, we want to have buttons, we want to vote, and so on. Okay, so these dynamic behaviors, and we will do every time we will do a little bit of something more that we can add to our application. I already have something to start from, okay? It's already published, so we just need to load it in the browser. So copy path, experiment with it, okay? So just HTML. Head, we don't care that much about the head. We just imported Bootstrap, I think. Yeah, Bootstrap, etc. The AJS because it's convenient. And then there is the body that basically contains an empty table, right? So just the header of the table, okay? And today we want to do two things. One, start from a structure, a data structure in JavaScript, which will be already hard-coded in the code, okay? So, like a list of answers, and create the nodes that modify the DOM tree so that we have, we dynamically create the list of answers from the JavaScript code, okay? Because this is the basics that allows us to, from data that we receive from server later on, to create something that can be shown to the user, okay? And then second part, I hope we have enough time. We add some behavior in terms of user interaction, so we can, I think, click, if I remember correctly. Yes, we can vote a question, and so do a small modification to a part of the DOM tree. So there is the score, and we increase it by 1, okay? But we handle the click, we add an event listener, and so on, and so we practice all the stuff that we saw together today, okay? So these files are already available to you, right, in the GitHub. So index, just okay, header and so on, but I mean, this is just nice to see. The point is that we have a table, class table, and the t-body with the answers. Note that I put ID answers, very convenient, because then later on I will write document get element by ID, answers, and then append child and so on, whatever we want to add, okay? Okay, there is time, but I mean, time we don't really care. Here, I loaded the rest of the code with defer, okay, as I suggested in the beginning of the lecture. The JS is fine. Our code as well, app.js. App.js is my code, okay? I already have something to load, okay? So some code has already been written, like the answers, okay? I think they are the same that we had in the DB a few lectures ago. Function answer, okay, it creates an object. I mean, but this is not mandatory. I mean, just for convenience, for practicing a little bit, okay? Answer list, from the answer map, okay, we create a list of answer objects because we create them with a new answer. For each, just console log, okay? So this app is already loaded in test not in test, in index, right? So it's here. So it should have already been executed by the browser. Let's have a look at the console. Indeed, they are there, right? We've wrote some code in JavaScript. It's already been executed by the browser because we put the code inside the HTML page. We said, okay, load it at the end. Load it in parallel and execute it at the end of the processing of the HTML, of the HTML parsing. Okay? Just execute it, right? Of course, just console log. We need to develop the rest. Okay? Let's develop something, right? So basically, we work in app.js. There's nothing that we need to do inside the HTML, right? Because we want to create everything from JavaScript, right? So I guess the first thing is, let's say create. Let's get the handle to the point where we want to insert the stuff, right? Const table body. Okay. Document query select. Okay, query select is very powerful, but I mean, I had the get element by ID, right? So not answer table body, but what was the name? It's answers, right? Answers. Okay. Okay, and then we could do table body. Yeah, inner HTML. I don't like it. Okay, so be careful about what the AI suggests. We said inner HTML is a bit dangerous. Okay, well, of course now we are creating the content by ourselves, so it doesn't really matter. Okay, but then we forget we use the inner HTML. At a certain point, we take some elements from outside, from a form, and so on, and it becomes a problem. Okay, so it's better to avoid it completely, right? So we should do append child, right? But then what? Well, maybe it suggests something interesting. We don't know. Create element TD content hello. It's probably not enough, right? Just for practicing, right? Yes, okay. So it closed the bracket here. So create element tr and then another append child. You remember you can call append child and so on any node. Create element td. I guess, I'm not sure if it works or not. Let's try. Because we have only one element, okay? And there are many columns. So I don't know how the browser behaves. Well, let's say we appended something in the first row, right? Even though, I mean, we are still missing 4 fields, right? But the browser is kind enough to render it anyway, okay? Even though there is just one TD, there should be 5 TDs, right? Okay? But at least we tried that something works, okay? So we need to restructure the code a little bit. So maybe we want to create a function to create a new row, right? I mean, this is just programming. You have to do the same thing 4 times for 4 rows, so create a function, right? And then call it 4 times. So I'm copy-pasting from the code I already have, which is not this one, it's this one. Because, I mean, the message is it takes a lot of time to write code on your own to modify the DOM tree, okay? So function create answer node, okay? We copy-paste this one. So basically, without the event listener, we do it later, okay? Oh, let's copy everything and then we add it later. Okay, so let's delete the event listener for the moment. Okay? So create answer node, new TD1, TD, and date, format, and so on. TD text, okay? Create text node and so on. TD create text node respondent, create text node score, okay? You can only create text nodes, you cannot create number nodes, okay? In HTML, everything is text, characters. TD button, button primary, so we can use class name, okay? Class name sets a class, the bootstrap class in this case, btn primary. ID, okay, text content vote, button, and then create element tr, append, and it's fine, okay? And so here we modify this code and we start from our data structure. And what is for let, right? Let ans of answer list. New, I would say new row, okay? Create answer node ans. So we call the function we just defined, which actually returns the tr, the reference to the tr, newly created tr node, okay? And then we need to remember table body append child. If you don't do the append child, nothing appears, right? Okay, that's all right. Yes, save. Reload, nothing happens. Okay, not expect. Okay, can't access lexical answer list. Answer list. I guess we had to put this afterwards, right? It's defined with let, not with var. We don't want to see var in your projects, right? Var is hoisted, the let is not. So it's just defined afterwards. So we cannot use it before defining the variable, right? But copy pasting, or almost copy pasting, say, okay, that's something. Okay, so now you see the list of rows, and you see that if you go inside the table, they're just normal elements, right? Nothing special. Okay? They've just been created through JavaScript. They didn't exist in the beginning. Okay? Okay, good. And now, let's try to add an event listener. So we practice a little bit with this event listener. Okay? While I must tell you, you know, this is just for showing you that creating nodes manually is a long and tedious and boring process. Okay? That's why in the rest of the course we will use React, because it simplifies this part a lot. Okay? We basically write so-called JSX, so it's basically writing the HTML directly, more or less. But then the event listener still needs to be handled in the same way as we are handling them here. Okay? So, important part, I would say, from this lecture is getting the idea that programming in JavaScript directly for creating nodes is boring and it's prone to errors, it's difficult to maintain and so on. And that, however, we can add event listeners and react to events. And this is more or less the same as we will do in React. Okay? And so this part is important in any case. So, we have a button. So it's very natural to attach an event listener to a button. Okay? The button is the first thing the user sees and the user uses. So it clicks on the button, right? So button, new button, right? Button. Add event listener, click. And then it says vote answer ID. Yes, but we don't have the function vote, right? A good idea, but I mean, let's try to write the function. Okay? So, first of all, maybe we can get an event that is the parameter of our callback, right? So we have event target and so on, just in case. I'm not really sure what I'm going to write. Well, I'm copying, I'm mostly copying, right? But I mean, just to speed up things, right? Yeah, vote event target ID, but we can, yeah, let's do this vote. Okay, AI was right. Vote. Once you reject a suggestion, they start to, okay, vote. I don't type anything, what's happening? Okay. Answer ID, answer creates a closure, right? Event target, is it good? Event target ID, yeah, it should work, right? Okay, but now we need the vote function, right? And since it's a bit long, I copy paste again. I mean, just because I want you to show how difficult it is to manipulate the HTML directly from JavaScript. Okay? Vote a certain ID. Okay? Answer list for each if EID equal to ID is core plus 1. And then what we are going to do? So, of course, I can go in the HTML and modify directly the content of the HTML. That's a possibility. Okay? So, I go, I mean, one of the things I could write here is like new content score and plus 1, right? Get the value of the new content score, so convert the text, parse int plus 1, and set it with the inner text, okay? But, I mean, in this way, I lose the fact that I have the information in a data structure, right? So this data structure is this one, answers, right? Okay? So I need to choose where I want to keep the information. Do I want to keep the information in the HTML? That's a possibility, but probably not so good, right? Because the HTML is something designed to show content to the user. Okay? So typically, and what we are going to do later on in the rest of the course with React and so on, but I mean, any good programmer would do this in JavaScript, is to have a data structure in JavaScript that represents the data you want to show to the user. Okay? That will become the state for React for those who already know something. Okay? And so, okay, I modify the number, and then there's an issue. How do I display things? I need to destroy everything and recreate everything? Or do I need to destroy or update only the thing that has changed? Yeah, it's difficult, right? That's actually the problem that React will solve for us. And today, since we have not so much time, but also not so much experience, okay, it will take a lot of time to write code that goes to search for the place that has to be changed and change it and so on. We just try this solution, okay? Delete the full list and recreate the full list. We already have the method for, create answer list. Well, actually, I didn't encapsulate this in a function, so this should be encapsulated in a function, right? Create answer list, since we are using it. So that's the same content as before. So this code is the same, right? Just put it into a function, right? Okay. Create answer list that needs to be called at a certain point. I think here, I guess. Create answer list answers. Okay, let me see if it's still working. No. Why? Create answer list. Answer list. Answer list. Answers. Answer list. Sorry. Okay. Okay, still working. Okay, and so we are just missing the clear answer, right? Clear answers. Well, that's probably the stuff that we where the inner HTML is useful. Okay. Just take the body of the body of the table, query selector tbody, okay? That's a possibility. Otherwise, we need to find a way to get a reference to all the rows of the table, okay? Query selector all for tr, that's another possibility because t add is th and not tr, that's another possibility. Inner HTML empty destroys everything, okay? Instead of, I'm not even sure if there is a method. There's probably a method to destroy a node, but I mean. Okay. So, let's try if it works, okay? So, in short, now we have event listeners for each button, okay? Maybe we can add a console log. Console log, button pressed ID, okay? Answer ID. And let's try. Of course, you need to reload the page, right? Console, vote, button pressed ID 1. You see the score changes, okay? But be aware of what's happening. We are destroying and recreating the list completely. And you see, actually, that you don't even see it, right? Because the browser is so fast, and basically, it only updates what has changed, okay? And that's more or less the same principle that we will have with React, okay, when we will start talking about React. So React helps us in matching the data structure that we have in memory with what we want to show to the user, okay, in an efficient way, okay? And that's why I wanted to develop this example in this way, so destroying everything and changing everything, okay? So two are the reasons. Second is more for the rest of the code. First of all, the first one is we want to have a data structure that represents the information that we want to show to the user. And in our case, it's this, well, the answer is from the stuff we start from, and this answer list, okay? So this just, it's a map, it's just another array because we want to use a little bit of object-oriented programming, but it's not mandatory, okay? But we update the answer list, and we recreate everything from scratch, because of course we made it with functions that can be called when we want, okay? So I think we finished the example, right? Yes, okay. Okay, so that's more or less all for today, okay? So we saw how to manipulate the DOM, okay? Even in a, I would say, not so trivial application, right? We already have a list of things taken from a data structure. We already have an event handler. We modify the data structure, so the content of the data structure depending on an event that happens. Okay, you can try the other buttons. Yes. And depending on what's inside the data structure, we recreated the things to show to the user. Okay? So basically, we have all the pieces needed to start programming on the client side. That is the topic for the next lectures. Okay? But we also saw that it's quite long, right? I had to copy-paste a lot of stuff. Okay? Because at the time, you try in the lab to recreate something with the films. And I think, yeah, given the time, that's all for today. If you have any questions or comments, you're welcome. Otherwise, there will be 3 labs, right? Tomorrow, Thursday, and next Monday, and then there is holiday. Okay, so no lecture on Tuesday, as we saw in the beginning. Always refer to the schedule. And yeah, we still need to talk a little bit about cross-site scripting, and then we will talk about React for the rest of the course. Okay? Okay, I don't see any questions, so thank you, and have a good Easter, even if it's a bit early, right? But I don't meet you anymore.